All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Jonathan Colburn for BioPub. Pleasure to be here on Friday. With me, we have Gary Prohl and Chris Nardo from Dermata. For those of you who do not remember them, we profiled them to some extent, I think, when you guys IPO'd, which was what, Gary, when was that? 2021?
It was about four years ago. Yeah.
4 years ago. And we're kind of very excited to be picking up coverage again here as we get on the cusp of phase three data. Gary, if you could give us an introduction to your company and, of course, an introduction to you because you have quite the resume.
Thanks, Jonathan. Yep. I'll give you a little bit of overview of my background, and Chris can do his, and then we'll jump into discussion on Dermata Therapeutics. I spent about 14 years at large pharma, what's now Sanofi, mostly in the commercial organization, marketing both in the U.S. and then in the global marketing area. And in '99, I was recruited to come out to San Diego to help start up a company, Centaurus, which was a specialty pharmaceutical company. I was the first full-time employee. We built the company up to five marketed products, three development products, about 350 million of sales, about 100 million of EBITDA. And in January 2014, we sold the company to Salix Pharmaceutical for a little over $2.5 billion. I took a couple months off, decided I was too young to retire, and started up Dermata Therapeutics the end of 2014. And then Chris joined us about mid 2015. Chris, you want to give your background?
Sure. Hi, Chris Nardo. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Dermata. I have about 30 years of drug development experience, a variety of large and small biotechs. My background is degrees in biology, statistics, and epidemiology. And most recently, prior to Dermata, I was uh, leading global development teams at Allergan in the botulinum toxin space, both in the urology therapeutic area and in more importantly the dermatology therapeutic area, and joined Dermata from there.
Excellent. And I see it looks like possibly you're a fan of Stratocaster or something as well, if I can see that over your shoulder.
That's a Telecaster back there.
Ah, I
Yeah,
couldn't quite see. Beautiful looking
yeah,
guitar, though.
yeah.
Well, that's excellent. The Allergan Botox is quite the important piece of information to note there, considering what you
Mhm.
guys had this week with Revance, and obviously that's wonderful, wonderful
Mhm.
news for the company. Gary, would you like to just jump on in? I think you can share, and if not, I will give you that ability.
Sure. Jonathan, it's Jerry.
Oh
I know it's
wow,
with a
it's
G.
nothing more exciting than watching a man fumble the name three or four different times. I apologize. I
No problem.
apologize.
No problem. So, Dermata Therapeutics, we're a dermatology company focused on both medical and aesthetic dermatology. We currently have a product, used to be DMT 310. We do have a brand name now called Zingari. It's Xyngari, and it's been approved by the FDA as a name we can use when we submit our NDA. So Zingari it's a natural product. It's called Spongia lacustris. It's actually a sponge that grows in rivers, and it has a number of different unique features about the sponge. It has chemicals within the sponge that are both anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial. So anti-inflammatory, so it blocks a number of inflammatory cytokines like IL-17A, IL-17F, IL-8 that are important in things like acne and psoriasis. It also has antimicrobial properties. So when we test it in vitro or in a test tube. We take out the inorganic matter, the spicules, and we just test the organic matter against C. acne. And C. acne obviously is a bacteria that's implicated in acne. And we're able to find that we can actually directly kill C. acnes. So that's the antimicrobial effect it has. So both it reduces inflammation, but it also can directly kill the C. acne. The other part of the spongiole lacustris is actually the inorganic matter. So there's these needle-like spicules. They're microscopic, so you can't really see them by the naked eye, but they're about 150 to 300 microns in length, very straight. And in 2 grams of product, which you would typically use to cover the entire face, there's probably 1 million spicules in there. So what they do is actually they create these microchannels into the dermis that allow the organic matter in the sponge, the chemicals within the sponge, actually penetrate into the dermis to have its effect on both the C. acne and reducing the IL-17, IL-8 inflammation. So that's the part of the sponge that's pretty interesting. The spicules also, because they create these micro channels, actually allow other chemicals to get in. And Chris will talk a little bit about how we can demonstrate that we can get botulinum toxin, which is a large molecule. It can't penetrate the skin by itself, but by using these spicules and these channels we create, you can actually get it into the dermis and have a number of different effects. So that's a little bit about the spongiole lacustris. What makes this product really unique, though, is the fact that all the current products that are on the market for treatment of moderate severe acne that are topical products are going to be applied once or twice a day. And our product, which is unique, is it's applied once a week. So it's very easy for patients to remember. We typically tell patients, you can do it Sunday night before you go to bed. You apply it, leave it on about 10 minutes, brush your teeth, wash it off, and you're done for the entire week. And since about 85% of the patients with acne are teenagers, and as most people would agree, compliance with teenagers, remember to do something once or twice a day, every day, is usually all that great. Being able to do it just once a week obviously will improve compliance, which usually leads to better outcomes.
And I would think that even for teenagers,
So we've got an ongoing phase 3 study that we've got expect to announce results in end of March of this year from that phase 3 study. It's a pretty interesting study that Chris can talk a little bit more about, and I'll really turn it over to Chris. He can talk a little bit about not only the phase 3 study, but maybe a little bit about the results from our phase 2B study that really was very similar to what the phase 3 study is. Chris?
and do you guys want to use your slideshow at all, or just go straight off? I'm happy, either way.
Ooh. I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah,
Can you hear Jonathan?
Yeah. Have you
Okay.
been able to hear me at all, Jerry?
I can now. I didn't before.
Oh, I was going to ask if you were going to use your slide presentation at all, or just go off the cuff, more conversational, whichever one works. I have no preference.
Chris, do you want to use any slides in the discussion?
Maybe we'll just, when we talk about the results from the phase 2B, we can show those slides.
Okay.
So yeah, just as Jerry loads those up, I'll just give you the intro. So we conducted a phase 2B study in in patients with acne vulgaris who were moderate to severe, which is much more difficult to treat than the mild to moderate. So here's the results. It was a double-blind study. Patients either received Zingari or placebo mixed with hydrogen peroxide. We use hydrogen peroxide in the preparation because it's processed as a powder, and we use the hydrogen peroxide to fluidize that powder so it can be easily spread on the face. But we've tried other things like water, but hydrogen peroxide works the best because if you ever put hydrogen peroxide on a cut, there's a little bit of foaming to that, right? And so what happens is it foams up, liberates oxygen, and the product becomes much more like a mousse and more uniform consistency and much easier to spread on the skin. So this was actually a trial that included children too, patients as young as 12 years old, because we wanted to have safety and efficacy in that group. And about half the participants were between 12 and 18. So a good number of patients in this study, as you might imagine, in that age group have acne. Patients had an investigator global assessment score of moderate or severe, which really means they had quite a good deal of acne. It was a 12-week study, and as Jerry just described, this is a once weekly application, which I think is really unique for this product. In fact, we have a physician investigator that's worked with us down in Texas, and when we first showed him the product, he said, "Wait, you're telling me we only put this on once a week?" He goes, "I can't get teenage boys to do anything once a day, but once a week, their mama make them." So, I think that's one of the real unique points of this treatment. In terms of the endpoints, we're very lucky in that the FDA has a guidance document that mandates what every single acne study should look like. So that's great for two reasons. One, there's no ambiguity about what we need to get approved. So that's great. But also it lets us compare our results to other trials. Although you must take caution in comparing results to other trials, but we're all using the same endpoints. So which is great. And those endpoints are absolute reduction in lesion counts, both the inflammatory lesions, which are the papules and pustules, but also the non-inflammatory lesions, which are the whiteheads and blackheads. We also use as I said, the investigator global assessment. It's a 0 to 4 scale: clear, almost clear, mild, moderate, severe. And everybody started at 3 and 4, which is moderate or severe. And as I said, these are the same endpoints in our phase 3 trial and in every acne trial. You can see that the adverse events are pretty low. And these are the most frequent adverse events. These application site reactions: itching, redness, dryness, a little bit of exfoliation. And the reason for that is the actual spicules that Jerry described, right? The siliceous spicules, which embed in the skin and allow penetration of the organic component of the treatment. We try to describe this as a mild itching, mild redness that is transient. Most patients don't have an issue with it, again, because it's once a week. And within several hours to, at the very most, overnight, that's the duration of the effect. So by the next day, everyone's totally fine. So there are no redness or itching after the next day. So really good tolerability. You want to do the next slide, Jerry? Yeah. So this is the tolerability slide. You can see 80 to 90% of patients reported no tolerability issues at all. If they did report them, the majority of those were mild. And then you can see there's no severe at all. This is very important because it's very different from other treatments like benzoyl peroxide, which has a lot of drying, or retinoids, which has maybe 20%, moderate to severe stinging and burning, and 20 to 30% erythema. So you're going to see a much lower tolerability of issues with this product compared to other products on the market. So we're really pleased to see this. And then the efficacy results, as I talked about, the lesion counts, whether you look at the absolute mean change from baseline and the number of lesions, or the percent change, we can see that there's a clinically meaningful and statistically significant separation as early as week 4. Really, after 1 month, we're seeing a very good treatment effect. And then for the duration of the trial, we see continued separation from the placebo group. And this is actually another finding that the dermatologists really were impressed with, is that if we look at the percent change from baseline in inflammatory lesions, and those are those red papules and pustules, harder to treat, we see almost a 50%, 45% reduction after 4 weeks. And that means after only 4 treatments, almost half the lesions are gone, which is pretty impressive. I don't think anything has that much of an effect. And I know that retinoids don't even begin to work until week 6. Now, they take a while to work. So to have the quick onset of effect and the once a week application leads to really good compliance because patients see an effect quickly and they don't have to apply this product every day.
One point, Chris, that you made with regards to the retinoids is, it takes about up to 6 weeks before you start to see the effect from a retinoid, and that's on a daily treatment. So you're
Right.
talking about 40 applications of a retinoid versus 4 applications of Zingari. So it's really quite different as far as the onset of action. And the important thing, obviously, is the faster a teenager starts to see an effect on their lesions, the more likely they're going to continue to use the product and improve compliance, right?
Right.
Do you know,
Yeah. And this was,
sorry, Chris, we've got a question from the audience. We'll couple about
sure.
Acleaf for triferritine and, asking if there's any sort of head-to-head comparison, especially noting that that's a very expensive drug. And this one is, I don't think going to be quite in that realm, although I don't know.
Yeah, triferritine has a decent response rate, but we there's no head-to-head comparison. But I can say that this is better. There's a publication coming out soon where we compare this result to all the other topicals on the market, and this has the highest IgA response of any topical treatment on the market. Obviously, it's not as potent as oral isotretinoin, but that has its own issues. Yes, most of the treatments are in the 30% IgA range.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry for interrupting.
and that's okay. And then, so this is what I was talking about, the investigator global assessment. Again, we see a separation early on. Only after 4 weeks, there's clearly a difference between the placebo group and the active group. And by the end of the study, day 85, 44.4% versus 17.8% in terms of treatment response rate. And that means that patients had to start, who all started at 3 and 4, moderate or severe, had to go all the way down. They'd have a 2-grade change, and they had to go all the way down to 0 or 1. That means that you couldn't go from 4 to 2. That's a 2-grade change. You had to go if you started at 4, you had to go to at least 1. So you had to have at least a 3-grade change. So that's a meaningful clinical effect. And this is the criterion that the FDA requires for approval. And then if I could just put my statistician hat on for a second, all of these, you see, we include the p-values, and you can see that the strength of association is very high. And we only had 90 patients per group in this study. And when we look at our phase 3 study, we have 520 patients. So we should have more than enough power to detect a statistical difference in our phase 3 study.
Great, good point. Good points, Chris. One of the things, Jonathan, that Chris was mentioning, and these are some of the newer products that have been approved. Amzeeq from Journey Medical, which is 4% minocycline. Sol-Gel had Twineo. It's a combination of a retinoid and benzoyl peroxide. And then Winlevi, which is a clascoterone. And the last one is a triple combination, Cab Trio. It's a combination, obviously, of clindamycin and adapalene, a retinoid, and BPO. And if you can look here on their data here, you can see we compare very favorably in our phase 2 data compared to these other products. And as I mentioned, most of these products are going to be once a day. Winlevi from Cassiopeia is actually a twice a day product. So you have to apply this product twice a day. You can see in their phase 2B study, they had 8.6% IgA compared to ours 44%. They performed a little bit better in their phase 3. One of the phase 3, it was 18. The other one, it was 20%, but still about half of what ours is for a twice a day product versus once a week product. And the reason I point out Cassiopeia is because when we talk about value of our company, and our current market cap's about $6 million, you can see here that the deals that Cassiopeia was able to get in licensing their product in different territories They got total upfront payments of about $65 million. For the US alone, it was $45 million, and milestone payments potentially of up to $270 million with double-digit royalties. As a small company, we realize that it makes more sense for us to move through development, but also look for a partner that can help us both pay for the second phase 3 study, but also then become our commercial partner. And obviously that would include some, an upfront payment, milestone payments, royalties. And these deals were done with a product that's twice a day with not great efficacy. And obviously, if we see similar results in our phase 3 to what we saw in our phase 2b study, we expect to be able to get some really good partners for this product throughout the rest of the world. So that's an important point. The other thing I'll point out, and some people might be aware of some things in the news over the last 12 months. So there's been work done on benzol peroxide, BPO. You can
Yes.
see here it's in Salgel's Twineo. It's also in Cabtreo, Bausch's Cabtreo. They found that benzol peroxide can break down and degrade into benzene, which is a class 1 carcinogen. There was a lab that's done some work on this, that's demonstrated this. The FDA has had a couple citizens petitions filed asking that BPO product get pulled from the market. We know the FDA is working with NIH to try to replicate those studies, and we would expect that we'll hear more from the FDA in the next few months on what they're going to do with BPO. And that could be anything from nothing to requiring cold storage, cold shipment of the product, to potentially removing the products from the market. So that'll be something, since the BPO probably represents 20 to 30% of the market and is used many times in combination with other products. It could create a real opportunity for Zingari, assuming we are able to demonstrate efficacy in the phase 3s and then obviously file the NDA. So
Yeah.
quite a bit going on right now in the market. Chris, any other comments on that?
Yeah, I think that 20 to 30% of the market is maybe a little bit of an underestimate, Jerry, because we have to remember that drugs like Winlevi, although it's been doing well, if you talk to dermatologists, they're not prescribing that as a single agent. They're prescribing that along with BPO and a retinoid. Amzeeq, minocycline, as you know, as far back as 2017, the guidance from AAD on acne treatment has been, do not give an antibiotic as a standalone therapy in order to prevent resistance of bacteria. So we've got to, when we view Amzeeq, when we view Winlevi, those aren't really standalone treatments. So BPO is actually being used in almost every treatment regimen by dermatologists. Dermatologists, if they're prescribing a topical, they can give oral isotretinoin as a single agent, but really the single agent is not really, it's really not being used in dermatology. And BPO is the heart of all those combination therapies. And I think it's going to make a real problem if BPO leaves the market, because you're just going to be left with topical antibiotics that can't be used by themselves, or retinoids, which have poor compliance, a lot of side effects, and a long time to initiation of treatment effect.
Good point, Chris.
That's, very interesting. You don't see too often when you have, you're coming onto a market, that's fairly mature. Obviously, new drugs are entering at all times, but where a third of the competition may be taken out by, again, or maybe there's some changes to what that competition is
Yeah.
shipping or whatever. That's a very interesting thing to come into. And of course, there are probably going to be a lot of potential partners should the first phase 3 data look equal to the phase 2, because it's, clearly standing out across the board here. So
Well, and I think, Jonathan, one thing to point out, obviously there are BPO products both RX prescription and OTC. And if the FDA were to require cold storage, it
Mhm.
might be very difficult for OTC products, right? That you're typically walking into a Walgreens or CVS and a teenager's pulling it off the shelf and taking it home and or leaving it in their car. It's very likely if the FDA were to do something like that, BPO probably would be required to be a prescription product so they can be cold stored at the pharmacy versus on the shelf.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah, and that adds to the cost of the product, right?
Yeah.
And so that's very going to be very cost prohibitive. Um, and then the other issue is a lot of these benzoyl peroxide products are in washes and scrubs, and they're used in the bathroom and showers. And in addition to degradation into benzene, BPO also degrades into benzene gas, right? And that gas is permeable through plastic. So if you have a scrub sitting in a hot shower, and we know heat degrades benzoyl peroxide into benzene faster, you're in a small contained space, shower stall, small bathroom, you're filling that room with benzene gas, which is carcinogenic.
So, Jonathan, I know you mentioned earlier that we did announce a partnership with Revance.
Yes.
Revance has a botulinum toxin product, Daxxify, and we previously had done some work with our product, Zingari, and Botox. And what we did is two studies, really. We did one where we looked at applying our product, washing it off, and then topically applying Botox for axillary hyperhidrosis. And we got really, really good results in that. And then we did a second facial aesthetic study. And what we were looking at really was our ability to get Botox into the dermis to reduce things like reduce pore size, reduce fine lines, reduce sebum production or oiliness of the skin, and improve the look of the skin. And we saw good results there. So we've been working hard to find a good partner. Obviously, folks probably familiar with Revance. They are in the process of merging with Crown Laboratories. It looks like Crown Laboratories, at least at this point in time. So maybe what I'll do is let Chris talk a little bit more about the data from the proof of concept studies and kind of what we think the opportunity is with Revance and Daxxify.
Great. Thanks, Jerry. So we had the idea to administer botulinum toxin to patients with primary axillary hyperhidrosis using using Zingari. And the reason for that is Botox has been approved for primary axillary hydrosis for 20 years. It's not used very often, even though it works phenomenally well. Because one, it's fairly painful to get 20 injections in your armpit, intradermal injections, and because they're intradermal injections, they tend to be difficult to execute, and usually the physician, the dermatologist, has to has to do that injection, and they don't really get reimbursed for it very well. So from a business perspective, it doesn't make sense for them. Patients don't like to go through the whole process. And it's time consuming and technically difficult. So we thought with the spicules, you can see this image on the left side of the slide here, we could allow the botulinum toxin molecule, and those botulinum toxin molecules are huge compared to usual dermatologic molecules. Most things like a retinoid, they're 400 Daltons. The botulinum toxin molecule is 900 kilodaltons, so 900,000 Daltons. Huge molecule. We did some work with ex vivo human skin, and you can see that if we stain the skin after applying the spicules, we get millions of microchannels in the skin. So you can see the dye penetrating the skin. And so we thought if we can get past that top layer of skin, the stratum corneum, which keeps all the bad stuff out, right? It's like a brick and mortar type layer of hard corneocytes, and it protects you from infection and viruses and things like that, fungus. And if we could penetrate that with the drug, um, we could actually get into the dermis because the spicules are the appropriate length to get to the sweat glands. So what we did is we made our sponge mixture as we always do. Applied the sponge mixture to the skin, wiped it off, and then we reconstituted Botox into its liquid formulation. We then applied it to the skin, as you see in this picture here, just expressed it onto the skin, and then massaged it using those microchannels that we've just created. And we thought, well, we think we can deliver botulinum toxin to the skin using this method. So next slide, Jerry. Yeah, so you can see that in this study where we had 10 patients, we each have one axilla, so two axillas, so 20 axillae. And this was at one site, and we looked at a 4-week response because that's when the peak response is, and that's what Allergan did in their registration studies. And it was a single application of Zingari, followed by one application of Botox. And the endpoints we used were the endpoints that were used in the registrational studies for Allergan, which was the percent of patients that had at least half of their sweat, gravimetrically measured sweat production, reduced from baseline. So 50% reduction from baseline. The percent of patients with sweat production less than 50 milligrams, and every patient had to have at least 150 milligrams of sweat. Some had 200, some had 250, but patients had to get down to less than 50 milligrams of sweat in a 5-minute period to be considered positive for that endpoint. And then the percent change from baseline to just get sort of a measure of the percent effect. And you can see that we had really good responses. If you look at the results, 80% of patients had at least a 50% or more reduction in sweat production. 85% of the patients had sweat production less than 50 milligrams, which is considered normal. And we had a 75% reduction in sweat production overall. So that actually compares very nicely to injectable Botox. In fact, it's almost identical to their phase 3 program. And in fact, when we discussed these results with Allergan, their CSO said, "Well, this looks just like our data." So it's pretty clear, and you wouldn't see this reduction in sweat from just transient weather changes. This effect means that we're getting biologically active botulinum toxin through the dermis to the target tissue and having an effect on those sweat glands. So it was really exciting to see this strong of an effect.
Yeah, a couple other points, Chris, you mentioned earlier. I think number one, the fact that you don't have to use a needle to inject, you just have to basically rub our product on and then rub Botox on, means that the patient's not going to get, the pain that you typically get with needle injections, right? So it's much more comfortable for the patient. It's also, because we're not using needles, it's very likely that this would free up the dermatologist, and a nurse or an esthetician could actually apply this versus having to take the time of a dermatologist while they can be doing other things. So, and then the last point is, this was an axillary hyperhidrosis study, so excessive sweating under the armpits. And that's what Botox is approved for. Mm-hmm. There's also patients that have either palmar, which is excessive sweating on the palms of your hand, or plantar on the bottom of your feet. Botox will never be approved for palmar or plantar because of the issue of, as Chris said, you have to just get it into the dermis. You don't want to hit a muscle. If you hit a muscle, Botox will paralyze the muscle for up to 3 months. And so you can imagine you wouldn't want to do that to your hands or your feet. We think there's a potential with our product that you could just take our product, basically rub your hands together with our product to get the spicules in, and then topically apply the Botox. So we potentially could be used not only for axillary, but for plantar or palmar hyperhidrosis.
Both brand new markets, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Right. So.
Chris, a question for you. How does
Mhm.
this, for this type of trial, axillary hyperhidrosis, how do you do that to measure this way? Is it like a chamber kind of thing where you see?
Um, yeah, so it's actually fairly straightforward. You use filter paper like we use in the lab, and it absorbs the perspiration. It's held under the arm for 5 minutes, and then it's weighed on a calibrated Mettler balance. And it's not just like a simple scale. This is a calibrated laboratory quality scale for like $2,000 each, and so they're very precise. And you weigh the filter paper that and then you put it under the armpit for 5 minutes, and then you weigh it again, and then that's the amount of sweat that has occurred in that 5 minute. The difference between the two.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, we also do something called the starch iodine test. I'm sure you remember from biology lab when you were in high school that iodine and starch, turns starch purple. So when it gets wet, so we actually use cornstarch on the armpit, and we can see what area is very sweaty, and then we do that before and after. We do it at week 1 and then at week 4, right? And so we can see that even the amount of purple has changed. That's not usually a clinical endpoint we can use for approval, but it's something that's very visual that we can see. Oh yeah, there's clearly a change in the amount of sweat being produced.
Got
So
a couple
we did
questions.
work in. Go ahead, Jonathan. Sorry.
Oh, no, we've got a couple questions in the audience. I don't know if you want to hit them
Okay.
now.
No, that'd be great. Yep.
Um, so I think regarding the botulinum toxin, you did a 30-day follow-up. Do you expect this therapy to be durable for up to 90 days to match the efficacy of the Revance product? And maybe Allergan.
Yeah, I think it should, because once the way the botulinum toxins work is they travel to either the neuromuscular or neuroglandular junction, and at that junction the nerve terminal releases acetylcholine, and that causes either muscles to contract or glands to secrete. The way that the toxin works, it moves to that junction, it cleaves a protein, specifically botulinum toxin type A cleaves SNAP25, and that prevents acetylcholine release. And so what needs to happen to restore function is your cells have to create more SNAP25, and that takes, depending on the person, anywhere from 2 to 4 months. So once you have an effect, you should be able to maintain that effect for 3 months. But we'll be studying that in the next study, the duration of effect.
Gotcha. Thank you. Another question, and again, we can move on whenever you like. Regarding back to the acne study, do you expect off-label, more frequent application, like say twice a week, as patients seek quicker results?
I don't, it'll be given in a packet, right? And so they'll get one packet per week when they're given their drug. So I mean, could they use more? I mean, they could, but they'd have to purchase more product. Now in other disease states, we've studied this in psoriasis too, and in that case, we might use like a twice a week application. But I have to tell you, having seen this effect with patients, after a single treatment, some patients have a huge treatment effect, and they're just happy. They're just happy to have that effect. And I don't know if they would actually use it more than once a week. Yeah.
So
There's a couple other questions. Jerry, you go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah. So obviously, axillary hyperhidrosis and hyperhidrosis in general is an interesting market, but probably the bigger market opportunity is in facial aesthetics, right? Everybody wants to look younger, and So we actually did some work in facial aesthetics, again, a proof of concept. And Chris, go ahead and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so botulinum toxin companies have been looking at using toxins to improve um, the look and feel of the skin, not just the large wrinkles in the forehead and crow's feet lines, but also the fine lines, pore size, um, brightness, luminosity, things like that. And the reason is that we found that uh, botulinum toxin, in addition to having its neuromodulatory effects, it also has effects on fibroblasts, which are the cells in your skin responsible for repairing and repairing the skin tissue and producing collagen, right? And so we thought, well, it would be really interesting to see if we can have a facial aesthetic study just to see, what sort of endpoints we would conduct. And so we conducted this study, and we had to use this on label because meaning that we couldn't vary from the upper face, which is what Botox is approved for. So we were restricted to the upper face. We were restricted to 64 units, which is the amount of Botox you're allowed to put into the glabellar forehead lines and the lateral canthal or crow's feet lines. And in this study, we actually did do a 16-week study to see if we had a long-term effect. So we looked at patients at 4, 8, 12, and 16 weeks. And as I said, we had to look at glabellar forehead and lateral canthal lines because that was the approved use of Botox, but we didn't expect to see an effect in those endpoints because you're thinking, okay, well, why'd you do this? Well, because we had to in order to follow the approved label. But those are intramuscular injections. We're trying to stay away from the muscle. We want to hit the skin because when you hit the muscle, that's when you have side effects like the droopy eyelid and the drooping brow and things like that, right? The spread of toxin events, and we wanted to avoid that. What we did want to see is improvements in fine lines, improvements in pore size, in sebum production. Pores are a function of your sebaceous gland activity. Those large pores you see because you have active sebaceous glands excreting sebum, secreting sebum. And if you can calm down those glands in the same way that Botox reduces the activity of sweat glands, you could shrink the size of that sebaceous gland and you could shrink the size of the pore, right? So that was the point. And if you do that, you have less sebum, you have more luminosity, more brightness, more smoothness to the skin. We conducted this study, and we found, first of all, that we weren't getting into the muscle. We had no distant spread of toxin events. We actually showed improvements in luminosity, brightness, and then just an overall global aesthetic score. And we reduced pore size, and there's nothing on the market that reduces pore size. We reduced sebum production, and actually the quality of the sebum changed too, right? Less waxiness, things like that. And then we actually had an effect on fine lines as well too. So that was really, really interesting. So you can see here the area of pores, not just the count, the number of pores, but the area in which the pores were reduced, as well as the wrinkle count and wrinkle area reduced in both the forehead, left temple, and right temple, because those were the treatment areas. And this is a really interesting. This is an image from a high-end photography system we used that can actually track the number of pores, and you can see a couple of things to note here. The top row is baseline, and in that first column, you can see there's a shine to the face, right? You can see some oiliness, and then at visit 4, that oiliness seems to have faded away, and you get more of a smoothness, right? And so that's sort of the luminosity and brightness effect, and that's very interesting finding. And then if you actually look on the right column, I don't know if you can see that on your screen, but there are little purple dots. And if you zoomed in on there, they're actually not dots, they're circles. And they measured the size of the pore. And you can see um, the, the, the photo on the bottom has much fewer purple dots, right? And so the pore count at baseline for this patient was 302. And then the pore count at visit 4 was 100. So 200 pores fewer counted, 202 fewer pores counted. That doesn't mean they're gone. It means they're so small they can't be detected by the camera, right? So you've really shrunk these pores. You can see that in terms of the pore area. So even the pores that remain are smaller, right? So that again, that is from the oiliness, and the pore reduction is really from reducing the amount of sebum and reducing the activity of the sebaceous gland.
Yeah, and one point, Jonathan, and I think Chris talked about this, is that when we used Botox, because we had to stay within the label, we had to use an approved dose. And the approved dose for facial aesthetics is 64 units, but it's injected into the muscle. The nice thing about our partnership with Revance and Daxxify is we'll be able to look at a dose ranges. And so that'll give us the ability to really see, as we push the dose higher, do we get even better overall results? Probably likely starting out in axillary hyperhidrosis, but then potentially working with Revance in other indications.
It's a very interesting, you've got this, I want to use the, handicap, if you will, based on the usage already existing for Botox, but you have such an interesting greenfield approach for what you can do with, going forward, as long as your product continues, or the combination continues to be safe and effective, how many other things you can kind of get into. And I'm sure that, the original usage of, botulism toxin are, they're envious of this kind of, using the spicules as an ingress into the skin on such a but a thin, it's quite brilliant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say that, yeah, that it solves a problem that people have been trying to solve for a long time, and there are some folks, not in the U.S. but ex-U.S. that give 100 micro injections into the face, and I just don't see that as one a feasible or cost-effective way of delivering this. And this can deliver the toxin to a wide field in the dermis at a uniform depth. And I don't think there's anything that can do that at this point in time.
It was interesting. There was just an article published where they use botulinum toxin, these micro injections, to treat a disease called melasma. And they found that it was effective in improving the look of the skin and getting rid of the melasma. But obviously, as Chris said, getting 40, 50 micro injections in your face is a little painful, not something most people want to do. But being able to just apply our product and potentially mix it with something like Daxxify could really open up a market opportunity for a lot of different indications, right?
Mhm.
And likely, it as you probably are aware, dermatologists are going to use the product how they want to. If we demonstrate that it works really well with Daxxify for facial aesthetics or hyperhidrosis, the physicians out there, dermatologists out there, certainly will use it with Daxxify, but they could also use it with any of the other botulinum toxin, like Botox, etc.
You guys are popping off, by the way, as far as questions from the audience.
Okay.
I know that that's probably a very good thing. Um, I don't know if you want me to go with those. And
Yeah,
again,
go ahead.
real quick, I
Yeah, sure.
apologize for I've been just getting over the flu. So if you see me dropping off,
Oh, yeah.
that's me trying to blow my nose off screen. So that's
Oh, I had it last week. I'm with you.
it's a fun time. Um, let's see here. Top one, long time and very enthusiastic shareholder here. You have late stage clinical trials underway with a novel therapy that seems to fit a major unmet need in acne and a platform that has additional indications. Given this profile, I would have predicted that your market cap would be literally 100x what it is today. So why isn't this the case? Do investors not believe in Zingari? and that it will have the positive phase 3 results and get approved, or that even if approved, this product isn't going to sell as much? What are the cost of goods slash supply? Some other concerns. What's investor feedback look like for you? Obviously, it's a multi-part question, but extremely relevant.
Yeah. So number one, I'm in total agreement that our market cap, based on having a unique late stage phase 3 product, is really ridiculously low. We completely agree with you. Obviously, getting phase 3 results should have a significant effect on our stock valuation in a market that is very large. And as we talked about, if something were to go on with the FDA with benzoyl peroxide, where they either removed it or restricted it, it would open the market up even more for us. And that's just using Zingari by itself for acne. I think people don't yet recognize the opportunity that we have with not only using Zingari to deliver Daxxify or botulinum toxin, which is a large molecule, but this is a delivery mechanism that could deliver other large molecules, right? So you could potentially deliver another a biologic for psoriasis and topically deliver versus injecting and getting all the side effects you get from a biologic. So there are a lot of uses of this product. I think it could be very broad. Certainly having once a week is going to be substantially better than what's out there. And we're hopeful that once we announce the results from the phase 3 study, people will start to recognize the value that's out there for us. And then
If you could,
the other part of the question, Jonathan?
yeah, there was more cost of goods sold. Anything is,
Yeah.
uh,
So
obviously, yeah,
what we've said is the product will have very good overall gross margins. I'll call them pharmaceutical type margins, which means in the 90% range.
gotcha.
So it'll be highly profitable.
And what is the market cap? Because there's a couple bad, because you guys have had, I think, one or two raises in the recent couple months, it's probably looking a little bit off.
Yeah, it's probably about $6 million market cap.
6 million, which is again infinitesimal versus what the market you're trying to get to. And Jerry, you guys just did a raise. You yourself put in, I think, about 1 million. Company insiders total 1.55. That's 66% of the raise itself. I mean, that's intent from management.
Yeah, you know what? We believe in the product. We feel that this is going to be a real advancement in the treatment of acne, and then obviously the work we're doing with Revance on Daxxify, we think could really open up the market opportunity. As I mentioned, our plan is to find a commercial partner, somebody that already has established dermatology sales force. We're a small company. It doesn't make sense for us to go and do it by ourselves. So we'll follow approach similar to what Cassiopeia followed with Winlevi. And as I mentioned before, if you just look at the deals here and the amount of upfront cash that they were able to raise, the potential milestones and royalties, the valuation of 6 million is ridiculously low. I mean, it just is, and I think we'll start to recognize that once we announce our phase 3 results.
Yeah, it's every single one of those numbers, pretty much, with the exception of maybe the upfront for the Middle East, is nearly equal to or significantly greater than. It's quite the opportunity should that arrive.
The other thing, Jonathan, too, and I'll just mention this is, we've gotten a couple patents issued. We just recently got a patent issued on Zingari for treatment of acne in the U.S. It's our first U.S. issued patent. So we filed a number of patents using our product in combination with botulinum toxins, with other monoclonal antibodies, even with dermal fillers, where you potentially could apply dermal fillers throughout the entire face to improve the look of the skin. So there's just a plethora of opportunities to use this product, and with substantially higher market cap where we could raise more capital, we could do a lot more with this product. I think really broaden the use of the product. We do have a great supplier of Spongilla lacustris. They've been harvesting and processing Spongilla lacustris for over 25 years. Um, and as I mentioned, really good cost of goods. The interesting thing about this
Mhm.
product too is because it's a natural product, it falls underneath the botanical guidelines. There's no approved pathway for a generic botanical. And as we've talked with some of the regulatory attorneys in Washington, what they've told us is it's highly likely that the FDA would require anybody that wanted to develop a similar product to do all of the non-clinical and all of the clinical studies that we're doing. They'd have to develop their own analytical methods. They have to develop their own proprietary placebo. So the I'll call it the barriers to entry are pretty significant. Not one typically that you're going to see a typical generic company follow. And then the other thing, certainly we have the opportunity once we're on the market as a prescription product for a number of years, we always have that opportunity to move the product OTC. And again, in the case of a OTC product, usually there are store brands, but it's highly unlikely that Walmart or Walgreens is going to go out to get Spongilla lacustris unless we decide we're going to sell it to them.
On that note, as far as supply goes, there was a question down here. Give me 1 second, sir. Um, we at BioPub follow another company which has a product based on leaves of a certain tree, and there is a question about how well the supply of those leaves will be able to keep up with the demand for the product. How plentiful is the supply for this Spongella lacustra, assuming the demand is successful?
Yeah, the nice thing about Spongilla lacustris is it grows in very large quantities and typically grows in the spring and the summer. It gives off these gemmules that plant on the side of the river, and then it goes dormant in the winter and then regrows. So it's constantly regrowing. Our supplier right now can harvest and process up to 30 metric tons of product. And they told us they could go much higher. All they need to do was hire some more people and buy a couple more boats. So it's really, I would say, almost unlimited supply of Spongilla lacustris.
Right.
You said about,
And
yeah.
the key is really we harvest after those gemmules are released. So think of them as like a spore, right? So we're not affecting the life cycle of the product, right? Because that product's going to die off and go, and that sponge is going to die off and go dormant in the winter. So it's renewable. So that's really a great feature.
Regarding the Daxxify Zingari studies, is there an increased sensitivity to sunlight following treatment?
Yeah, so we've never seen any photoreactivity or phototoxicity and in any study. Moreover, FDA asked us to conduct a standard phototoxicity challenge study and submit that to the NDA, and it was deemed to be not phototoxic and photosensitive in any way. So we don't expect to see that in a label.
Gotcha. For the Daxxify Zingari phase 2 trial, what's the anticipated timeline for that clinical trial? Is Dermata also looking for a partner to fund that, or is Dermata planning on funding the trial itself internally? If Dermata is looking to partner, would that ideally be the same partner funding the phase 3 for Zingari, the second phase 3? And if so, does that potentially limit the number of potential partner companies? So again, another
Right.
multi-part.
So I think what we would look to do is find a partner that's interested in Zingari and the acne indication, right? Now, whether or not they would be interested in funding the study with Daxxify, we don't know. It will depend on the partner. We could end up with a partnership um, with Crown Labs, where they're interested not only in what we're doing with their Daxified product or what could be their Daxified product, assuming they complete the merger, but since they're a dermatology-based company, they could be very interested also in Zingari by itself for acne. So it'll depend on the partner. But as I said, we will be looking for a partner that at least provide us with upfront payment, and that payment could be used both for the phase 3 study, but also to fund the study with Daxify.
Gotcha. Will you be able to do, this may be more aspirational, the combination of Daxxify Zingari on the nose?
Um, I don't see why not.
Okay.
I mean, we use Zingari on the nose right now, so
Yeah.
if you want to affect pore size or yeah, you could, sure.
Well, I think that the question was based on the idea that botulinum toxin is only, in this kind of area. So whether or not, but you guys should have the freedom to go lower, considering that you're not going to be.
Right. Once we conduct it under the IND
Mhm.
of Revance, we can propose anything to the FDA as a research study. We had to follow because we did the study on our own with Botox. We had to follow the actual label.
Sure. Um, when used in facial aesthetics, do you see any of the type of, the typical muscular lack of motility that's seen in people who have fresh Botox injections?
No, not at all. That was, it's noted that in the previous slide there were no distant spread of toxin effects.
Right.
So the toxin stayed the within the skin and the dermis, it didn't migrate to the muscle. And in fact, the FDA required us to do very detailed neuro exams in all these patients just to ensure there were no impairment of muscle. So it wasn't like just a usual botulinum toxin study. We actually had to do a thorough neuro exam to ensure there were no distant spread of toxin effects.
Gotcha. With so much competition, what strategies and or tactics will you employ to gain a foothold, and how long until you reach peak sales, and what would those potential sales be? This would be, I think, just under the Zingari kind of label, if you will.
Yeah, I think if if anybody's listening today, go talk to somebody that has acne or a parent of a teenager that has acne and ask them this one question. If there's a natural once a week product that has rapid onset of action, really good overall effect on both inflammatory and non-inflammatory lesions, also reduces sebum production and improves the look of your skin, would you be interested in trying this type of product? And I think what you find is 100% of the people you talk to, the first thing they'll ask is, where can I get the product? So while there's a lot of different acne products on the market, there's nothing that's like this particular product. And as I said, it not only gets rid of the lesions, but it stimulates new collagen production, improves the look of the skin, and reduces sebum production. So all of those things will and it's very tolerable in a once a week application. I think we'll be able to easily differentiate from everything else on the market.
Uh,
In one of our first conversations a couple of months ago, I think, Jerry, one of the things that I was kind of stuck at, like mentally, was, there's kind of two MOAs here, right? There's the spicules themselves, which are just going to have, that's always going to be useful for skin, right? That's why we do
mhm,
microdermabrasion, et cetera, although it's not exactly the same thing. And then,
right.
of course, there's the inflammatory, cytokines, IL-17, which of course is extremely de-risked, right? There's a whole host of companies following that from a more systemic. So it's a very interesting, and I love the fact that you've mentioned that you've done studies, separating the inorganic versus, kind of just the spicules themselves from the chemical compound
Mhm,
of the spongilla. So it's an excitingly unique and just odd, you know. Oh, I
right.
would, but I mean, it sounds like, from a quick read that it's just kind of a pretty common lake sponge. Well, not maybe not pretty common, but a very like, you know, and yet you guys have been able to glom onto this as a brilliant idea of, working this through. It's very clever science.
Yeah, the other thing, and Chris didn't mention it, but in our phase 3 study, the FDA asked us to also look at acne scarring.
Ah,
And so we'll have that data in addition to the data on inflammatory, non-inflammatory lesions and IgA. We'll have data on acne scarring and be able to see, can we have some improvement on scarring? Because again, those spicules They penetrate the skin, they cause sloughing off of your dead skin and stimulate collagen production. So that'll be some pretty interesting data too, because there's not a lot out there right now for treatment of acne scarring.
Gotcha. Um, what would be the annual market potential of this indication if you get an approval?
That's something that I think we need to see the phase 3 data, and how it, certainly compares to what's out there. But, there's no reason that this product can't be in the hundreds of millions of dollars, in sales. There are 50 million patients in the U.S. alone that have acne. About 30 million are seeking treatment at any one time. And one thing about acne is patients are still not happy with the products that are available. As Chris says, um, we know that if you use isotretinoin oral, it will get rid of your acne. It just has some really significant safety and side effect issues, and most patients and most dermatologists will reserve that really for the most severe patients, and after they've tried other topical and oral products. So we just think that there's a huge market out there for something that's unique, and there've been a number of products launched, and that might be a combination of double or triple combination therapy, but all of the individual components have been on the market for years. Clascoterone, Winlevi is the first really kind of, I'll call it, unique product to be launched. The efficacy is not great, and it's twice a day. And our efficacy is much better, and it's once a week. So I just think we're going to be able to compare very favorably to everything else out there.
I I no disagreement. Can't wait for March. So we're 2 months, give or take a week or two, either way, I suppose, from that data coming out. And obviously, fingers crossed, Jerry, that this is going to be similar to, although superior doesn't hurt either, the phase 2B that you guys have already put together.
Yep.
Um, what are the strike price for the warrants that are available on the public markets? I didn't realize there were warrants out there that were publicly traded either.
Yeah, the publicly traded, I don't know the story. It's pretty high because we've had um, multiple times we've split the stock. So the strike price on the warrants, I can look. We can get back to you on that,
Sure.
but it's pretty high on the
Gotcha.
publicly traded ones.
Gotcha. A follow-up to an earlier question. Can you give an estimate for the TAM for both axillary hyperhidrosis and for facial aesthetics?
For the what, Jonathan?
The target TAM, target addressable market for the axillary hyperhidrosis and the
Um,
facial aesthetics. And if I'm pronouncing things wrong, I'm gonna
Yeah,
pick my nose.
so there are about 15 million patients that have hyperhidrosis. So that would be the target market there. As far as facial aesthetics, anybody anybody that wants to improve the look of their skin. The thing is about what our approach is, it's really complementary to how dermatologists are using botulinum toxin currently, right? Where they're injecting it to take care of deep lines, whether that's forehead,
mhm.
lateral canthal, or glabella. Ours is really complementary, and quite honestly, because we think we can reduce size of pores, reduce fine lines and wrinkles, improve the look of your skin. Ours would most likely be used earlier in younger patients prior to them getting those deep lines, right? And that's what we think. It'll be very complementary to what's currently being done with botulinum toxins.
Gotcha. Um, the 1 year stock price, the fall seems overdone. What caused the sell-off back in April of 24? That's not when you guys had one of your reverse splits, is it?
Probably when we reverse split, yeah.
I think it is. We had a reverse split to raise money in April 24.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
to be compliant with NASDAQ, to stay compliant with NASDAQ.
Let's see. You mentioned the supplier can harvest 30 tons of sponge in 1 year. How does that translate to the amount of usable product?
Hmm.
So
Well,
30 metric tons. So a metric ton is 1,000 kilograms. 30 metric tons, you know, this is 30, um, so it's 30,000 kilograms, and there's 2 grams in each dose. So that's like 15 million doses.
So sufficient for a bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll be okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's a few questions, but some of these have been kind of answered already. Um, well, I guess, what else do you guys want to hit, considering, there's data here in 2 months, give or take a bit.
Mhm.
Obviously, this is not just a one product company. You've got significant room to maneuver into on the, as this develop relationship with Revance kind of increases. What else would you guys like to hit?
Well, Chris mentioned we did a little bit of work in psoriasis, a proof of concept, and
Yeah.
we definitely saw
Mhm.
some effect there. We think probably, whereas for acne, we're applying it once a week, and we think that's sufficient. We think with psoriasis, because you have these thick plaques, it's more likely that probably you might want to apply it a couple times a week to break up the plaque. But as I mentioned, because we can deliver large molecules, I think there's always the potential that we could use our product in combination with a biologic that's approved for psoriasis, for more mild psoriasis, right? Where you have spot maybe on your elbows and your knees. You don't really want to go to an injection of a biologic, but you potentially could use it for spot treatment topically versus injecting it. And so I think there's a potential for this product to be used in a lot of different ways with a lot of different biologics.
Yeah. No, and I assume, you could probably start looking potentially into something like atopic eczema. I mean, the entire, I&I space, immunology, inflammation is massively on fire. Sometimes it's a little too crowded in certain spaces, but this is extremely different. A topical thing like this that could augment the ability of drugs from all walks, really. It's very unique.
Yes. So again, we've got data coming out in the end of March. Obviously, I wouldn't have put $1 million into the company if I wasn't feeling good about the results. So we'll, when like any biotech company, you keep your fingers crossed when you unblind it, and you hope you see good data, and then we're on our way. I think we'll start to see the valuation really expressed appropriately once we, I think, unblind the data and see good data.
Well, again, fingers crossed, but I don't see any more, existing data is a huge tell, and of course, a CEO willing to put more money in, again, because you've invested, I want to say, close to $20 million of your own money in this company. Is that correct, Jerry?
About 16.
16. Um, let's see. Thomas is asking, with the recent funding round, does the company anticipate any further capital raises before partnering for a phase three, for the second phase three, or are there any other planned major expenditures in Q2, Q3?
So we now have cash that lasts us into August of this year, and that includes being able to begin scaling up the manufacturing. So once we get the results from the first phase three, we're lined up to begin the manufacturing of the product for the second phase three, and then we'll look to start the second phase three the fourth quarter of this year. We will need to raise capital to do the second phase three. Now, that could be a partnership with an upfront payment, or it could be a capital raise. And we'll be certainly pursuing both those opportunities to be able to not only do the phase three, but also move forward with the axillary hyperhidrosis study with Zingari and Daxxify.
Well, fingers crossed. Like just it's a very exciting situation. Um,
Mhm.
the last question
Anytime
here,
you have data coming out, it's exciting, right?
anytime. It sounds like you have a killer product. Assuming good phase three, how will you get the word out to make share price take off? It's not quite anything beyond just a press release. Is there an IR blitz, that kind of thing? Do you have?
Yeah, we're actually talking about potentially doing maybe an investor call with one of our KOLs that's involved with the study, and he's um, been involved not only in the acne study, but he's certainly worked with Revance on Daxxify. So we're looking at potentially doing an investor call where you can actually hear from an investigator that's been involved with using the product.
Yeah. The KOL calls are always wonderful.
Yeah.
Um, have there been any highly adverse reactions to the product?
Yeah, if you go back to the slide that has the um where's that slide? The slide with yeah, that slide right there. So you can see these are the most frequent adverse events. And so the most
Yeah.
frequent is 4% of patients have redness, 2% of patients have itch. And these are considered related to treatment. So in terms of if you mean a serious adverse event, there have been patients who gotten sick and needed to be hospitalized, but not related to treatment. Just they
Yeah.
maybe got COVID or something during the study. But really, there's been no issues. In fact, the FDA was so comfortable with this product, they allowed us to waive all systemic toxicity because there was just really a great safety profile and great non-clinical data supporting that.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
A replay of this will be on BioPub's website as well as on our YouTube channel, which will be not behind any sort of private wall. And I believe Tori Hills will have a copy of this as well.
That's right. Yes.
And we're happy to have that sent out to whomever, whenever. Last call for questions, unless you guys want to sit here listening to me slowly drain from my nose, and I do apologize for that. Yeah,
Not a problem.
professionalism. Karen's asking, you said you have about 15 million doses right now. Seems low considering all the applications you guys may have. Is there in essence, will there be there's sufficient product beyond what is currently harvested, correct?
Correct. Right. It's more it's the availability is almost unlimited,
Okay.
but there's no reason for our supplier to harvest any more because obviously we're not using that. But they told us they can continue to harvest more and more product. They would obviously need to hire some additional people and some additional boats to do it, but that's a really minor expense.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
All right. Well, that's it. Jerry, Chris, it's been quite the pleasure. Again, sorry for my own self, and also sorry for mispronouncing your name. Even though you and I have had a couple phone calls,
That's
I
all right.
apparently just read, and it's a foolish thing from me. I apologize. Um, any last words, Chris or Jerry?
No, we're excited about the phase 3 results. Obviously, we're prepared for moving pretty quickly in scaling up manufacturing and getting the second phase 3 up and running. That particular phase 3 will be the same design as the first phase 3, and then we'll also have an extension study where we follow patients for an additional 9 months for a total of 12 months on therapy. And that's a requirement for every acne product from the FDA. So we'll have long-term data also from the second study.
Excellent. I love the fact, sometimes the rare disease space we cover sometimes at BioPub, and you're working with very niche, different, kind of half-made endpoints. Whereas here, this is, one of the most well articulated from the FDA. You know what you are doing. There's no
Mhm.
surprises. It makes things very simple. Uh, all you have to do is have a product that works, and it sounds like that's not a concern here.
Yeah, as Chris said, these are well-defined endpoints. The FDA requires anybody that wants to develop a product for moderate severe acne to hit these 3 endpoints. And as long as you hit them with statistical significance, you're good to go.
Mhm.
Perfect. Well, with that, we'll follow that as good to go. Again, Jerry, Chris, thank you so much. Best of luck. Can't wait to see the data. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We will have this up on our website. We'll get this out to everyone else. And I appreciate the time and enjoy the rest of your Friday.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank
Appreciate
Take
it.
care.
you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
You guys have a
Take
wonderful
care.
day.